Then on Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Baylor Bears. Definitely one of, if not the biggest surprise team of the 2021 season, as this team went 12-2 overall. They won the Big 12 and even won the Sugar Bowl. But how will this team be in 2022 is what we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. And this team they were at 12-2, which is pretty unbelievable out of Baylor. I mean, this is just a football team that was really good back in 2019. Back in 2020, they were pretty disappointing. But 2021 was a huge surprise. This team exceeded all expectations last year. 12-2 overall once again. Beat Iowa State 31-29. They beat BYU 38-24. Even beat the Sooners of Oklahoma 27-14, which was a huge win, obviously. They beat Kansas State on the road 20-10. Beat Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game 21-16. And beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl 21-7. So this team beat multiple top 10 teams last season. Multiple extremely talented teams. And I mean, Baylor last year, this was a team that was kind of in the background of the Big 12. Everyone knew that Baylor was a decent team, but this team really, I mean, it was only until Baylor beat Oklahoma that we really realized, like, the Bears are a for real football team, and this team continued to dominate from there. And Oklahoma State, they were one game away. If they beat Baylor, they would have been in the college football playoff, but the Bears spoiled those chances, that's for sure. And so the Bears won a Big 12 title because of it. But this team was 6-1 in their first 7 games and then 6-1 in their last 7. So I mean, once again, just an excellent football team last year. So yeah, huge credit to this team. But looking at your roster now going into next season, Gary Bohannon's coming back. Your starting quarterback from last season, that's going to be a big return. He put up 2,200 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 63% completion rate. So overall, a good season for Gary Bohannon. Definitely a player to keep an eye on going into the future. We really didn't know too much about Bohannon going into this season. Obviously, I mean, 2021 was his first season as a college starting quarterback. So, but overall, not a bad season at all for him. And he also put up 300 yards of rushing and 9 touchdowns on the ground as a bonus. So, yeah, Gary Bohannon, good season for him. But the running back position loses 2 key players. Abram Smith and then Treston Ebner are both taking off. 2 running backs who combined for over 2,700 yards on the ground last season, 16 touchdowns as well combined by those 2 running backs. So that's going to be tough. I mean, Abram Smith in particular put up nearly 1,700 yards on the season and 12 touchdowns. And, of course, Ebner as well was a big part. So, I mean, this rushing game was tough to stop last season. And that was a key part of this offense. And so moving into the future, that's going to be kind of a challenge, having to replace both of them. But we'll see how this team does. That's going to be very interesting to see how this team does without those 2 key players. They also lose their top receiver in Tyquan Thornton, also a huge key player there. He put up nearly 1,000 yards of offense, 10 touchdowns as well. So that is a bit concerning. Second receiver, R.J. Sneed, is transferring away. So you lose your top 2 receivers going into next season. So this offense, I mean, there are a lot of people that are really hot on this Baylor team, and I think this team is going to be good next year. But, I mean, you're losing a couple of key players there, multiple, going into next season with your top 2 receivers and then your top 2 running backs. But Drew Estrada is coming back, your 3rd receiver last season. Last year he put up just over 370 yards. So he is the top receiver that's returning for this team. Tight end Ben Sims is also coming back. He'll put up just over 360 yards as well. So you got two of your good receivers there coming back as well. Plus, I mean, your tight end. So that's going to be good. But still, losing your top 2 receivers is going to be tough. They also lose 2 offensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and then 4 in the secondary. So this secondary is taking some big hits defensively going into next season. So this team does take a moderate amount of losses. I think that's definitely something to note going into next year, is that this team actually they lose some inexperienced players going into next year. So there's a bit of concern there. But the Big 12, completely wide open going into 2022. I would argue it's the most open conference of all of them. I mean, you got Oklahoma, who could make it back, but they lost a couple of key players. And, I mean, of course, you got Caleb Williams, who took off, and then Lincoln Riley, the head coach, is also gone. So, I mean, it's really interesting to see where the Sooners are at right now. You got Oklahoma State as well, who's looking like definitely, I'd say, the favorite right now. But then, of course, Baylor just won it last year. So, yeah, there's a lot of teams that could go out and win it. I mean, K-State, I would say, is a dark horse. I mean, you got several other teams. Texas, you never know about them either. So, I mean, there's a lot of teams to really watch out for going into next season in the Big 12. But potential playoff contender next season. This is a team that some people are saying is potentially playoff contender. And this team, I would say, ended up as the 5th best team in the country. I mean, the way they played against Ole Miss, this team just looked excellent. I understand Matt Corral got injured, but still just a solid win, holding Ole Miss to 7 points. And Baylor last year, I mean, this is a phenomenal football team that really, I mean, at the end of the season, they really turned it on and had a great finish. So, yeah, Baylor going into next season, this team I definitely think is a contender. I'm not sure about playoff contender, but this team definitely has got a chance to make a run at it at least. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season, this team really isn't too active in the transfer portal. R.J. Steen, of course, took off to Colorado. You got Jackson players coming in from Tulsa. Defensive lineman, Colby White's taken off. Jacob Zeno is a quarterback who went to a B. And then Tyrone Brown is also in the transfer portal from Baylor, a safety. Recruiting-wise, this team isn't looking too bad. 36th in the country right now, 5th in the Big 12. You got 2 4-stars coming in and then 19 3-stars. So obviously not as good as you'd hope, but Baylor overall, not a bad recruiting class at all for this football team. And 2023 is even better from what it seems right now. That's how it's like your schedule now going into next season. You start off the year against Albany on September 3rd. And that game was supposed to be Louisiana Tech, I think, but that game got canceled, and this team had to look for a new opponent. And they end up with Albany, which is a team that struggles to even get wins in the FCS. So that's a bit concerning for that football team. But for Baylor, that should be a walk in the park, if you ask me. And then you got a challenging one. You got BYU on the road. That's a pretty good football team that you'll be facing in Provo. So keep an eye on that one. Then you got Texas State coming to town. You go to Iowa State to kick off your conference schedule. Oklahoma State at home. That's going to be a huge one. West Virginia on the road. Kansas at home. Texas Tech and Oklahoma both on the road. Then Kansas State, TCU at home. And then Texas to finish out the season on the road. So some intriguing matchups for sure on this schedule. But looking at your first 6 games, Albany, easy win for sure. I mean, that's a game that Baylor they could drop 70, 80 points on them if they really tried. BYU is going to be definitely a tougher one on the road. I'm going to favor Baylor for now, but I mean, that's definitely one not to sleep on. BYU is a team that's returning some good talent. They should be good going into next season. Texas State, easy win. Iowa State on the road. That's going to be a close one. I'm going to favor Baylor for now. But Iowa State going into next season, I'm not really too concerned about them. I thought 2021 was their year for sure. I mean, I thought the Cyclones would be a team potentially a college football playoff contender last season with the amount of talent that they had, but just a disappointment of a season for the Cyclones. Then you got Oklahoma State. I'm going to favor the Cowboys in that game for now, even though it's at home for Baylor. I mean, Oklahoma State next year is going to be a good football team. That is a team that I could easily see in the college football playoff. I mean, and potentially not even the last team in. They could be a number 2 or number 3 seed in the college football playoff potentially. They've got some good talent. That's going to be a tough game. I'm going to favor the Cowboys for now, but it's going to be close. West Virginia on the road, I'd definitely favor Baylor right now, but it's on the road, so I'm going to keep it in yellow. For the second half of your schedule, Kansas, easy win. Texas Tech on the road. It's a road game, and Texas Tech tends to be a dark horse at home sometimes, so I'm going to keep it as a close one, but Baylor's still favored. Oklahoma on the road, that's a tough one. I'm going to favor the Sooners right now in that game. I mean, Oklahoma's a really unpredictable football team. That's a team that's got some great talent, but with the coaching change and quarterback change and all that going on, I'm going to favor Oklahoma. I mean, it's tough to favor them in that game, but I'm going to favor the Sooners for now. They've got a pretty strong home field advantage. K-State, TCU, both games that are interesting, but I'm going to favor the Bears for sure in both of them. Then Texas on the road, very interesting football game with it being in Arlington. I'm going to go with Texas to be favored in that game as well. And once again, I mean, this is a football team that I think a lot of analysts are really high on. There are a lot of people saying Baylor is going to be a big-time contender, possible college football playoff contender, which I understand. But, I mean, from what I'm seeing here with the running back situation, that was just such a huge part of this offense last year. And they're losing, I mean, 2 running backs who put up combined 2,700 yards last season, which is, I mean, that is a significant loss. I mean, those 2 running backs, and plus you're losing your top 2 receivers. Transfer portal, you're really not getting any major talent from the transfer portal. I mean, honestly, not at all. And the recruiting has been good, but it's not been great. So Baylor, next season, I think this team is going to be good. They might not be quite as good as some people are expecting, but I mean, I'm going to keep the range pretty wide here, 7-5 to 11-1. So I see this team definitely getting at least 7 wins next year, but I'm going to cap them off at 11 wins. I think this team at least loses 1 football game for sure. But obviously a very interesting schedule and a very interesting season coming up here for Baylor as well. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this Baylor football team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.